Hello, my name's Cade, and this is DSLRguide. Today I'm going to be talking about this lens. It's my Canon 50mm 1.8, also known as the Nifty 50 and Fantastic Plastic. So, I'm going to go straight into it and say that I'm actually going to sell this lens. Canon lenses have a good selling price. You can pretty much get the same price that you bought it from, selling it used, which is nice. So I'm going to try and see if I can get, just under the price that I bought it for. So in this video I'm just going to go over the main features of the lens and why I'm going to sell it. So I think I'll start with specifications. So it is a 50mm lens, which on my camera, which is the 600D, that has a crop sensor of 1.6, so you times the 50mm by 1.6, because it'll be assuming the 50mm is what it looks like on a full frame camera. So it is the equivalent of 85mm, which is kind of, if 50 is in the middle, 85 is a bit more zoomed in than that, to put it simply. So it's the sort of thing where it's not the most versatile lens for my camera. If you have a 5D Mark II, 5D Mark III, it would be better. But for me, it's not the sort of lens you can just put on and know that it will be great for 90% of situations. Especially shooting indoors, it's the sort of thing where you're going to want to back up more, and you can't. So it's not the most flexible lens for my camera. The main reason why I got this lens is because it has a 1.8 aperture. So my other lens, which is the one I'm using now, the Tamron 2.8, the aperture only goes down to 2.8, which is, although that's good for a zoom lens, I thought, well, I still have to I want to use ISO as little as possible, so aperture is the best way of doing that. But what I was surprised to realise is that the difference between 1.8 and 2.8 really isn't that much. I know that, I think that between 2.8 and f4, that's one stop of light. And I'm not exactly sure what it is between 1.8 and 2.8, but it's 1.8 to 2.8. So I think those might be quarter stops or third stops. Not sure. But basically, I was expecting to be able to go from ISO 800 to ISO 400, or 1600 to 800. But basically, what it means, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. So for me, I would rather just stick with my Tamron, because it's not that much brighter, and it basically, you just lose the versatility of having that full 17 to 50 zoom range. So the other reason why you'd want to get a prime is because the focus throw is better on a prime lens than a zoom generally. Although on here you get about, it's not even 90 degrees. If I show you, if I start at the top here, and that's where I'm finishing, so it's about 75-80 degrees, which really, it means that when you're focusing, it's not nearly as smooth as I'd like it to be. Now my Tamron has only got about probably just over 90 degrees, but the difference is it's a lot smoother. This, people say this lens feels plasticky, and to be honest, I don't mind about that, but it's the focus ring that's the annoying thing. It's right on the edge, and it just, you can hear it. It's not silent when you're moving it, which you'd expect that for autofocus, but it actually, it's not smooth by any means. It feels like it's got some grit in between, and it's really hard to get it precise. And then the other thing is, it has, the front element does extend when you focus, which I think it's called breathing, which means that you basically zoom in slightly as you focus, which if you've got something really close to the lens, then that will be noticeable. Now there's one other reason why you'd want to get primes, and that's the image quality. And that is the one thing that I thought, I've heard people who, they have the kit lens, and then they buy this, and they are just amazed at how sharp it is. I've heard that it's tack sharp, especially once you stop down a bit, especially for the price. And the thing that I found is that my Tamron is actually very close to the sharpness. There's a big difference in the contrast, and I'll put up some tests so you can decide for yourself. But as far as I'm concerned, and especially for video, I don't think that this is any sharper than my Tamron, which I was really surprised to see that. And it must be a good copy of the Tamron, because I have heard some people saying that Tamrons aren't that sharp. But I did some JPEG images, scaled them up. I was at full resolution and I scaled them up, and to be honest, there really isn't a difference in the sharpness. And then for video, of course, it's even less noticeable. So that was the other thing. I was kind of expecting my Tamron to be quite soft, but yeah, like I say, it must have been a good copy. So those are the reasons why. Those are reasons why you might want to go to a prime lens, but also why this lens, in my opinion, fails at that, because I was expecting it to be brighter, and for me, the price you have to pay of using primes, so you can't zoom, is not worth. It's not worth switching out your lenses to a fixed focal length when you're only getting slightly more light. So I've decided that I'm going to invest this money in lighting, because if you spent £70 on lights, then you can go from, I don't exactly know, but that makes a huge difference to the amount of light that there is. If you have a 800 LED, then that can brighten up a complete dark room, whereas obviously stopping down from 1.8 to 2.8 isn't going to make that much difference. So although I don't think this lens is for me, I would recommend this to anyone who has got the kit lens, and only the kit lens, because the kit lens, I'm pretty sure, is a f3.5 to 5.6, which means that if you're zooming in to 55mm, you only get an f5.6, which is quite a big. The difference between f5.6 and 1.8 is quite a lot. So, especially if you're indoors, then it would be really great to be able to not have to stop down to f5.6. Whereas if you have a 2.8 constant aperture lens, then I really don't think this particular lens is for you. So the price is good, it is a very cheap lens, but for me it just doesn't add anything. If I were to buy a prime lens, the reasons why I'd want to buy it is if it was really sharp, and something I realise now that I didn't think would be a big deal, but the focus throw. If it has 180 degrees or 360 degrees would be great, so you get really precise movements, and that for me would be a reason to switch to a prime over a zoom. So if I were you, if you have a constant aperture of f2.8 on any of your zoom lenses, stick with that, because then that saves you from buying 3 prime lenses, and you can just buy 1, and invest the money that you save from the prime lenses on lighting, because that can have a far bigger impact on the brightness of your image, as opposed to just being able to stop down to 1.4, 1.8. So yeah, just to summarise the review, I would say it is sharp, but for me, not noticeably sharper than my Tamron, and it does stop down to f1.8, which is great, but for me, again, it wasn't a big enough difference between the 2.8 to justify the £75 that it cost me. And the focus throw really is very, very short. So I would say if you're going to buy a prime, that is one of the main reasons. And I know that the 50mm 1.4, although the image quality is very similar, it does have much better build quality, which this definitely lacks in. And the focus throw is a lot better. I think it's around 180 degrees. So like I said, if you have the kit lens and no other lenses, you're looking to buy a second lens, I think this would be great. But if you have constant aperture of f2.8, for me, I don't think this won't really help you. If you're going to buy a prime, spend a bit more money and get one that has more focus, more throw, more degrees of turn between closest and the furthest focus point. And if not, if you don't want to spend £300 on a prime lens, then just buy some lighting, because then you can make a bigger impact to the brightness, because for me that's probably the biggest issue. I don't like to go past ISO 800. Even at ISO 800 it is quite grainy. So, and when you're indoors you're always gonna want to, you want more light. So I would say 2.8 is great. Anything more than that, I don't think it's worth the extra money. So I'd recommend you just buy lights.